Hello and welcome to a very, very special edition of Football Talk by the 2 Point Conversion. We are live during the draft. It is currently the 22nd overall pick. The Los Angeles Chargers have just selected UNC running back Amarian Hampton. We're going to dive into just an overall recap, everything that's happened. Travis Hunter going to Jacksonville, of all places. Ted McMillan going to Carolina. There's been a ton of action, really not many trades so far, other than just the massive one in the top three with Travis Hunter going to Jacksonville. They gave up a ton to get him, so it'll be interesting to kind of go over that, go over your thoughts on that. Today, I'm joined by Jacob LaQuire. Jacob, your Panthers took Ted McMillan. How you feeling?
I am ecstatic. Throughout the process, I've told you how uneasy I would be with Jalen Walker being like a primary edge rusher at 8. Mason Graham comes off the board with that bizarre Jags and Browns trade. And so I'm like, all right, well, trade back maybe. Who's it going to be? But I'm happy with Ted McMillan. I think finally a true possible number one option for Bryce Young in the passing game after he's had to endure the likes of DJ Chark, Jonathan Mingo, and the rookies this year who had their fair shares of ups and downs.
Yeah, I think it's a electric pick for Bryce Young, who apparently was working out with Ted McMillan this offseason. That's what Ian Rappaport reported. So it's a really fun fit. Carolina adds another piece to an offense. I love it for them. I think that they needed another dynamic piece to kind of add. And, they had Xavier Legette. He looks more of a long-term, high upside wide receiver too. I'm not sure that he's going to be the primary, receiving option in an offense. But Ted McMillan, just a really fun fit. So
it's the Mike Evans and Chris Godwin that Dave Canales was used to. I think those are the two projections for each player. So I'm really, really excited with that.
We're going to kick things off, right? The Jacksonville Jaguars made a trade up to the second overall pick. And with that pick, they selected Colorado wide receiver and defensive back Travis Hunter. He is the first overall player on our draft guide with the 2-point conversion. What were your initial thoughts on A, the trade, right? And then B, his fit in Jacksonville? I mean, it's a massive move. I think James Gladstone, the general manager, has already said F them picks, right? So They gave up a first-round pick in 2026. They gave up their second-round pick this year, and then there were some late-round swaps as well. What are your just overall thoughts on everything that's happened?
Well, first, I was kind of confused with the parameters. I think I had the ESPN feed on at the bar that I was watching, and it said that they swapped seconds as well. I don't think that that's actually the case. Excuse me. I think that they end up giving the Browns a second. I don't know, but I think they get fair enough value to where when you're moving up for somebody so worthy of a second pick, right? A generational player, as we talk about, right, with Travis Hunter. I really, really like the fit there. He doesn't have to be the number one receiver right away. They have Brian Thomas Jr., who shined as a rookie last year. He can be the number 2 receiver. He can help out in the secondary. And I really, really like the fit with new head coach Liam Cohen. We saw what he did with receivers last year in Tampa Bay, and now it's just going to be electric. Hopefully, Trevor Lawrence could come along. He can reach that potential we saw a couple years ago when he was in the playoffs against the Chargers. But I really, really like the aggression that the young Jaguars front office and coaching staff is showing with that deal.
Yeah, it's a really fun fit, both offensively and defensively. I think, their general manager pointed out that, they traded a first-round pick in addition to the 5th overall pick to get him. But, they viewed him as a first-round pick at wide receiver and as a first-round pick at corner. And I think it's really intriguing from the Browns standpoint as well, right? We've kind of been talking throughout, the 2-point conversion chat that we have about, what on earth are the Browns doing giving up a pick of this caliber with arguably one of the best non-quarterback players in recent memory, right? Like Travis Hunter is that guy. And, to give that up, there was a report from Corey Kinnan, the kind of a Browns insider, who said that, this Mason Graham pick came straight from Myles Garrett. Whether or not I fully buy into that, I maybe he had some sway in that sort of,
Mhm.
but when you kind of dive into it, I think it's a really intriguing sort of bet. Mason Graham, a first round pick, a second round pick, or this generational type of prospect in Travis Hunter. I think it's going to be kind of interesting to track it. Um, I would have been a lot more disappointed if the Browns moved back and took a guy like Kelvin Banks or Armand Membu, right? Just because I think you're kind of limiting the ceiling that you're going to get on a pick like that. So I am at least happy that they took a guy like Mason Graham, right? Like I think that was a solid selection for them. But it's a hard thing to give up a guy like Travis Hunter.
It is, but and you say but, right? They get Mason Graham, who I think we agree is a top 3 or 4 player in this class, right? Really, really good defensive lineman. He can. I don't know if Miles Garrett had a big say in the pick, but even if he didn't, I'm sure he's happy, right? That he gets such a phenomenal talent beside him and Mason Graham to help rush on defense. And I think that adding Graham to an already say above average to elite defense on paper doesn't raise their amount of wins enough to where it takes them out of the Arch Manning race next year, the Lenore Sellers race. Or I mean, we could also see them try to trade up for one of these quarterbacks in the back end of the first because I don't think any quarterback's gone since Cam Ward. We're still waiting for that second QB, so maybe they could be a trade up team. But even if they aren't, I think that they're building a foundational defense for the future for whatever rookie QB comes in the future and takes over. At least they'll be able to play complementary football, right? We saw how the Panthers struggled with that with Bryce Young, how the Bears have struggled with that with Caleb Williams, even the Patriots as well. You want to have at least some really, really good foundational players on the roster, and that's what I think Mason Graham is. And then you're also getting a first from a team with the Jaguars who may not be super good next year. I know Travis Hunter's really good, but Trevor Lawrence struggled this year despite having such a good rookie receiver in Brian Thomas. So you never know where the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to end up.
Yeah, it's an interesting bet for sure because let's say Liam Cohen is worth the hype. Let's
Mhm.
say all these additions that they've had, whether it's I forget the name of the receiver, he's from UNC originally, De'Ami Brown, right?
Yeah.
Patrick McCarry that they added. They've added a few interesting defensive pieces, right? I think Jordan Lewis is one of them. So they've added a few solid players. It's they've also they lost Christian Kirk, they lost Evan Ingram, but I think when you're taking a bet on such an electric player, it's I think it's always a good thing when you're getting the best overall player in a trade,
Yeah.
right? And I think they very clearly will end up with that with Travis Hunter. I can't really bet against that sort of guy, so I'm all in for Jacksonville and kind of what they've done, and I'm interested to see how he fits on a team that already has Brian Thomas Jr. They have a guy in Tyson Campbell that's a really good corner already, so I think it's going to be interesting to see the split that he plays, whether it's
Mhm.
like 60% offense, 40% defense. Maybe they reserve Travis Hunter for obvious passing downs on either side of the ball. But I think it's just a really fun fit, and it's a real shame that this Jaguars team is in Jacksonville, Florida, of all places. But it's a really fun draft night just because of that trade alone, honestly.
Yeah, well, I recently just came home from the beach and I drove through Jacksonville, North Carolina, and maybe around the same amount of people relatively with with each state there. But I think it's super exciting, right? Because Travis Hunter doesn't have to be the wide receiver one immediately, nor does he have to be the corner one immediately. I think they extended Tyson Campbell on quite a reasonable deal before the corner market swooped in. So even if they want to give him 50-50 splits, which I would advise against. He doesn't have to be the guy right away on either side. So I think it's a really, really good bet. You mentioned that in a trade, when you can get the best overall player, it's always good. They got the best player in the entire draft, as far as I'm concerned. So I like the gumption, the moxie to go up and get it as a new young regime, and I also like it for the Browns to get a top 3 or 4 player and bet on having 2 first next year. If you want to get a QB or maybe they want to wait again, they could always get 2 good players before they get the QB in 2027.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how they end up utilizing these assets. Maybe they could, we're only on pick 24 right now. The Vikings are on the clock. Maybe they end up trading up to this 24th overall pick where, Minnesota only has 4 draft picks right now. They could definitely be in the market to add some more. So they have 2 second round picks. I think they have 2 third round picks as well, if I'm not mistaken. So they have a lot of ammo. It's just going to
Well,
be a matter of kind of utilizing it to find a guy if they want one in this class in particular.
for sure, I want to talk about that 23rd pick because the Packers never do this, right? Like this is so out of character for a Green
Yeah.
Bay regime that loves taking defenders round one and loves taking second round receivers. But Matthew Golden, the Texas wide receiver, going to Green Bay, I thought he would have a bit of a slide. I thought he would end up with the Chargers at pick 32. Ends up at 23. Maybe he can be like the finally have the true wide receiver one in their offense. But I don't know about this pick. I think they still needed help on defense. I thought their receiver room was like fine enough, but I feel like that's the theme with quite a few of the picks so far in this draft. Like the player that goes to the room is it's fine already, maybe a bit of a luxury pick, but they had needs elsewhere. But in a draft that is so low and high in talent, right? I think we could probably cut it off after the top 6 or 7 players. I think we're going to see a lot of this, like a lot of luxury picks for teams and like throughout the end of the first round.
Yeah, Matthew Golden's such an intriguing player. Where did you end up having him on your big board?
I did receivers a bit early in the process, right? This is before the combine, before all of that, and not like the combine would change my opinion on him. I had Golden at 38. He was my wide receiver 6. So Travis Hunter, Tedero McMillan, Emeka Ibuka, Luther Burden, and Jalen Royals from Utah State. I'm pretty big on Jalen Royals. I think he matches up well with another Packers receiver, Jaden Reed. That was my comp for him. And
Yeah,
Golden came in
I
right
like that.
behind him. I think Golden's really good. I'm not sure he plays as fast as his 40 time was, and I'm not sure he'll be a number one receiver in the NFL. I wrote in our 2 point conversion when I ranked receiver options. He was kind of in the best of the rest group after the first 4 for me. I understand the value he can bring in taking the top off of a defense, but I've been mocking defensive players to the Packers, I think, throughout the process. Just a little bit stunned by this one. They're kind of breaking protocol, doing something that they aren't normally used to do. And I really wonder if there's pressure from the head coach to like get the defensive ball because Brian Gutekunst loves to pick defensive players. Maybe it's like, all right, let's get an offensive guy in here. Not sure, but I think he will perform quite well with Matt LaFleur scheming stuff up for him. Excuse me.
His contested catch sort of skill combined
Mhm.
with his downfield ability provide, I think, the ideal type of receiver for Jordan Love in particular. That's kind of what excites me about this pick. I don't think it's the best value in the world. I'm kind
Mhm.
of with you. He's towards the mid to late 30s on my personal board. He kind of seems like, if I'm the Packers, I kind of would rather take a swing on a guy with, not to say that Golden doesn't have a high ceiling, but he's an older prospect. He, it was a really late breakout for him. I think that, if you wanted to take a receiver, I would have maybe tried to trade up for, I don't know, like Buka or even Ted McMillan, even though that's a pretty far jump to go. It's still, like I said, an ideal fit with a guy like Jordan Love. I think it's a fun sort of match between those two. And like you said, it's kind of shocking that the Packers ended up taking a receiver in the first round after, years of people clamoring for them to take one when Aaron Rodgers was quarterback, right? And they ended up, Christian Watson, Jaden Reed, a few years ago. So it's a fun fit. He kind of slots in as a starter along with Reed and Watson in the immediate future. I wonder if he's just going to be able to kind of stick out from those guys because it's a lot of the same caliber of players in that
Mhm.
receiver room right now. They're all like, average, above average guys, and they're all pretty young. So I just wonder how well he's gonna stick out from that. But before we continue, I want to do a shameless plug about our draft guide. We have 100 plus player profiles, 100 plus player comparisons. There's over 170 players ranked in our draft guide. Our guy Colt did an incredible job with the visuals with this draft guide. For just now, like it's a very limited time offer. It's $1, right? So you can scan the QR code on the screen right now if you're watching on YouTube, on Twitter. You can scan this QR code. It'll take you to the shop. It's $1 to get this draft guide. We're going to show a player comparison, or excuse me, a player profile. This is Josiah Stewart's profile, who isn't going to go today in all likelihood. It would be pretty shocking if he did. But, you can see strengths, weaknesses, player comparison, quick bio, measurables, a grade that we have. There's a lot of details in a profile like this. And there's 100 plus of them. Travis Hunter has 2 cards, one for his wide receiver and one for his corner card. So there's a ton of info. Jacob, you worked on it a ton. You did a lot of the offensive players. Steve, our content manager, did, the defensive backs, some interior offensive line guys. So with that, I took the front 7. So there's so many details, and you can find it at 2pointconversion.com/shop. Very simple. You can scan the QR code. Jacob, do you have anything you want to say about the draft guide?
Yeah. First of all, love to have worked on. I'm glad you reached out and would you like to contribute? Really awesome project. I learned a ton. And 2, I don't know if we're in the right age range, but I grew up as a young kid. My mom used to eat big league chew all the time. She was a big gum person, and you would get a baseball card out of each one, right? And this is what it kind of reminded me of. The hardcore nostalgia there really stuck out to me. I think Colt did an excellent job, and I know you and I are both big Josiah Stewart guys. I don't think he'll go in round 1, but that'd be really, really cool. And I'm glad you showed this one because that's one that we both like. And as we're talking about it, a trade comes in, right? And it's the New York Giants after the Minnesota Vikings selected. I 100% expected the Vikings to try to trade out. Didn't work. They end up taking Donovan Jackson, the guard and tackle from Ohio State. But the Giants coming back into the first round with 25. I believe that's Houston, right? This has to be a QB, right?
Yeah, so Minnesota took Donovan Jackson with the 24th overall pick. Houston trades out. They get pick number 34, number 99, and a 2026 third-round pick. So presumably this is one of Shedeur Sanders or Jackson Dart. I don't have confirmation. We're not going to spoil the pick before it happens. If you watch tomorrow, which we're doing a live stream tomorrow, we're going to cover day 2. It's going to be really fun. We're going to be back at it. Kind of showing off the draft guide a little bit more like we are here. In that one, we might be tipping picks just a little bit, maybe a few times. But yeah, I know who the pick is. I don't know if you're aware, but
I'm not looking. Yeah,
it's interesting for sure.
It's certainly a player in the 2025 NFL draft. I almost want to look now, but with you saying that, it gives me pause, right? Because I've liked Shedeur Sanders to this team in a couple of the mock drafts I've done, just because I think he can take his time and marinate behind the 2 veteran QBs that they already have. But with the way you're reacting, it kind of indicates that maybe this isn't Shedeur, maybe it's somebody lower on the 2-point conversion draft guide. I did a cool article about people outside the top 50 who could go in the first round. And if it's not Shedeur Sanders, it's probably one of the QBs that I talked about in Jalen Milroe or Jackson Dart. So I'm really looking forward to the pick. You have me wanting to reach for my phone. I'm not going to do it, but maybe we can talk about some of the other picks that have already happened. Like what's been your favorite player team fit so far of the first 24 picks?
I'm just gonna run through. I want to look at the night's kind of flown by. There's been a lot of really fun fits. Selfishly, I love Ted McMillan to Carolina. Just the more I think about it, but if I had to pick a non-Carolina team, I think it's interesting that John Schneider finally accepted the fact that he's going to have to invest in the interior offensive line by taking Greg Abel. I think that's a fun fit. I mean, he has some tackle versatility, so maybe that's how the Seahawks sold themselves on it a little bit more. But it was a much needed type of pick. I really like Jalen Walker. I know you're not the biggest fan, but Atlanta really needed an edge rusher. They got their guy. Another one that I think is just like pure aesthetically pleasing. Michael Williams is a phenomenal fit on the San Francisco 49ers.
Yeah.
Like opposite Nick Bosa, I don't really think they could do better in terms of skill set, on that defensive line. Like that is a truly incredible fit. And I think it's a really good value as well. Michael Williams was 8th on my personal board. I think that, he's long. He didn't really get to play in the ideal situation at Georgia. And I think he's got some untapped pass rushing juice. So bare minimum, you've got an elite edge setting run defender that's going to grow on, obvious passing downs.
Yeah, Williams was 14th, I believe, on my board. I'm just looking at it, and yeah, I really liked him. I know our Panthers fan contingency liked Jalen Walker a bit better. I think maybe because the Panthers invested time into Walker, or that was the report, and so people wanted to get behind that. I'm seeing the terms of the Giants and Houston Texans deal now.
Yeah,
that's not I kind of like that for the Giants. I don't think they didn't give up a future first or a future second. They just gave up their second this year, so I really like that.
2/3.
Yeah, good value there for whatever QB they take. I really like the Jets taking Armand Membu. One of my buddies was when we were watching the draft early out in Charlotte. He's a Jets fan. He said, "I don't know who I want, but if we can build in the trenches, that's the smart thing to do." I was kind of expecting the Jets to do something dumb because that's kind of what the Jets are known for. But Joe Douglas isn't there anymore. And so they do the sound thing, take the right tackle to pair with Olu Fashanu from last year. And even if Justin Fields isn't the guy, they have a young, stable O-line for the future. So they can get their guy in the future. You have a critical reaction there. You might be ahead of me, but did they announce the pick?
So they didn't announce the pick. The Falcons traded up to the next pick, so they're on the clock at number 26. So they didn't have. Did they trade a future first to get this pick? Is that what happened?
They must have, because you and I did an episode on Football Talk maybe a month ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, about bold takes.
They didn't have any picks.
The Falcons. One of your takes actually was the Falcons, Vikings, or Rams might trade back. And it was the Vikings because they had 4 picks, the Rams because they just love day 3 picks. The Falcons had 5 picks. So I'm pretty curious as to what the Falcons are doing. I see the Giants pick now, which is interesting to say the least. I know you and I are not the biggest fans, but they have a guy that they can.
They've announced it officially. I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken. Like my stream is 2 minutes behind, so I truly don't know. But we'll go ahead and spoiler warning if you haven't seen it yet. The New York Giants have selected Jackson Dart with the 25th overall pick, a quarterback out of Mississippi. I'll let you take the lead on this one while I update the ticker.
Well, he is a quarterback out of Ole Miss. I can say that. He started his career at Southern Cal. I think he has tantalizing traits, right? He has an arm that can access all the areas of the field. That was kind of the thing that Lane Kiffin had him do, is when they would scheme the receivers open, Dart could hit all the areas of the field. I think he has a little bit of untapped athleticism as a rusher as well, although I think he goes down pretty easy with contact. It's an interesting one, right? Because I think when you go Dart instead of Shedeur Sanders, for example, you're kind of betting on upside as opposed to someone who could maybe just run your system. I think that if Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen are content, or if the ownership is content on keeping Daboll and Schoen going forward, then I think Dart is immediately a better pick, right? Because he can do some of the rushing stuff that Brian Daboll requires out of his QB. He can access the deeper parts of the field that I think Malik Neighbors and the re-signed Sterling Shepard can really stress. So I think this is a pick for the future. I think it's a better fit than Shedeur Sanders. I'm interested to see if there's any other QBs that go in the first round, because if I had to bet money, I wouldn't have put Dart as QB2. But we're here right now, and I think we still have a quarter of the draft to go. So it's going to be interesting. There's been reports of the Browns and Saints and the Giants, but the Giants have actually done it now, all trying to get back into the end of the first. So interested to see what happens here.
Yeah, I think with Dart, I'm really interested to see how he fits in New York. Obviously, they signed Russell Wilson, they signed Jameis Winston. So, initially he's probably going to be QB2, QB3. Um, I think that Brian Dayball is somebody that likes to put a lot on the quarterback mentally. And to this point, Jackson Dart hasn't really had to, do anything like that where, Ole Miss runs a very simplistic system. It's a lot of the same concepts, just in different fonts at Ole Miss. And, when you're learning an NFL playbook, especially one that's fairly complex, I think, that might cause a little bit of, a friction in the learning process. So I'm glad that Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston are there from the jump, because I don't think this is a situation where you want him playing honestly at all in year one. So obviously, like, the Giants go 0-3, people are going to be calling for him pretty immediately. And
Yeah.
if it's also a situation where, the Giants, you're kind of like screwed either way. You're going to have to spend a premium pick on a quarterback, 25th overall. And if you're Brian Dayball and you're Joe Shane, you might not even see Jackson Dart by the end of your tenure, because you lose one too many games this year and you're out. So I question the process of keeping that brain trust in New York, right? And I think I question that more than the actual Dart pick itself, because I think I can sell myself on Jackson Dart in the first round if I really squint. He has arm talent. He's pretty mobile. He has a lot of quarterback traits. Everybody at Ole Miss seemed to love him. So I can sell myself on that. I just really question the process of the Giants keeping everybody in place and spending a pick like this on a quarterback that might not even play for this head coach, for this general manager.
Well, I think there's a couple things with that. Number one, Abdul Carter softens the blow a good amount, right? You didn't take Jackson Dart at 3. You took a top 2 or 3 talent in the draft. And I'm seeing the Falcons trade parameters. Oh, my goodness. They did give a future first, their first round pick next year. Yes. So the Falcons gave their second rounder, their seventh rounder, and a future first in exchange for 26 and the Rams' third round pick. I believe it's a compensatory selection, 101. So that picks in.
Wow.
And then back to the Dart thing. How would you compare him to Bo Nix? I think Bo Nix played in quite a maybe a fake offense at Oregon with Will Stein. A lot of screens and a lot of deep shots, like manufactured deep shots to Troy Franklin, similar to how the deep shots were manufactured to Trey Harris this year for Ole Miss. And I think that seeing 6 QBs go in the top half of round 1 and seeing most of them have at least a modicum of success is really going to push teams to be like, if we can make this work, let's just go do it, right? What's a future? What I think it was just 2/3, right? Was the intrinsic value that the Giants gave. What's 2/3 for a guy that could be a franchise quarterback? So I think those are the points that the Giants are looking at there.
Yeah, I think it's really fat. Like, if you're Joe Shane's kid posting Jackson Dart highlights on your Instagram story,
he did give it away this morning.
He did give it away. Like that. That's kind of not. Sorry, I just can't get over this Falcons thing where.
Well, they took both of the Charlotte guys or the North Carolina guys, right?
Somehow they got a third back in 2025. So you said the full terms, like 2025 first and third to the Falcons for the Falcons second round pick and a first and 7th next year. So the Falcons, I don't know if it's been announced yet. My Safari window low key kind of crashed. So
it has, at least on my NFL Plus app, they've announced it. And that's probably a minute behind or a minute or two behind. So James Pierce Jr.
That's why
that was somebody that I think a lot of people expected to fall out of the first round. He is my number. I want to look at my board real quick just so I get it right. He is my number 7 overall player. And when I grade stuff, it's just on-field talent. I don't know anything off-field, like character, anything like that. But Pierce can really get after it. And the fact that the 2 local guys from North Carolina, from the Charlotte area, both end up on the Falcons, you hate to see it as a Panthers fan. You also hate to see the fact that they address edge rusher for the first time in like ever, right? For the Falcons,
Right.
they never
Twice.
twice, right? Trading a future first, they never do it. I think they must really be all in and think that number one, Michael Penix is the guy, and number two, if they can fix their edge rush, their defensive front, that they can hold the lead in the NFC South next year. That wasn't necessarily the case, right? The Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I don't want to say they won it handily because it did come down to Week 18, but the Panthers, we fried them in Atlanta at the end of the
Yeah.
year, and there were a lot of games throughout the year that I think the Falcons were lucky to win, including both Buccaneers games that came down to some crazy stuff. So it's rough for me. I'm sure Falcons fans are happy to finally get edge rushers, but
Yeah.
to give a future first away, I just don't know.
So they gave a future first, they gave a second round pick, and they gave their third round pick, as well as the 16th overall pick, or excuse me, 15th overall pick this year on three edge rushers. Right? They traded their third round pick for Matt Judon.
Mhm.
They traded into the first round pick for James Pierce, and they spent the 15th overall pick in the top half of the first round on Jalen Walker. So they've invested heavily at this position at this point, and obviously, I think Jalen Walker and James Pierce bring a ton of juice off the edge, right?
Mhm.
I am super high on James Pierce. I think he's got, obviously a lot of speed. He's very quick off the line. He's got some length to him. I think he's got more power to him than given credit for, getting after the passer. He gets eliminated in the run game at some points, but I think that he's just an electric type of edge presence and somebody that fell, I think, in this draft in large part due to character concerns. That's just me speculating based off of what I've read. That combined with it's funny that the Falcons take James Pierce, who has reportedly fallen due to those issues, but their 15th overall pick is like quote unquote one of the highest character guys in the draft,
Yeah.
right? So it's almost
Mhm.
like a a paradox of
Well,
Falcons players. I mean, at least they have an identity at this point where they add two juiced up edge rushers. They could put them on opposite sides. Maybe they view a guy like Jalen Walker as kind of a more linebacker type than on the edge. Maybe that's kind of what this is hinting at, but just a really fascinating draft if you're Atlanta.
yeah, and each player kind of has the opposite part of the projection, right? Jalen Walker's projection to edge requires a lot of foresight. Like, how are you going to use him, right? So you're going to be like a weak side blitzer. Can you actually line him up at the edge? And then James Pierce's projection is like, does he love football? Can he be coached? Like, that's the alleged off field stuff. If you put them together, they're a phenomenal player. I would have been happy taking James Pierce at 8. I think he's that good of a player. He's an
Yeah,
analytics
very talented.
darling. His pressure rate, his run stop rate through the roof, and that's on limited snaps as well. And I don't like seeing him go there as a Panthers fan, but seeing him go in round one, I think is super rewarding for a guy who, throughout the process, I don't want to say his character's been attacked, but has really been dinged to the point where people were thinking he could be a pretty welcome second round pick, right? Like somebody in the top 10 picks in the second round, but really good to see him go in round one. I just hate to see it as a Panthers fan. I wish he would have gone to
Yeah.
like the Vikings or something, or even the Rams who had this pick initially. I think that would have been a cool fit there. I'm interested to see what the Rams do. I think you and I both have been kind of pushing Mason Taylor to the
Yeah,
Rams
for
at
sure.
the end of the first round. They're not in the first round anymore, so maybe he falls to them in round two. But they and thinking from the Rams' perspective, actually, they finally get a second round pick now, right? Because
Yeah.
Carolina owns their second round pick. So doing this trade gives them extra capital this year and next year. Win-win for everybody all around, except for trading a future first for somebody that's not a surefire bulletproof first round pick.
Yeah, I think that honestly, like, I love James Pierce. I really love Jalen Walker. Simultaneously, I also think this move is a little bit, it smells of desperation just a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think that trading, a future first round pick when honestly the Falcons haven't done anything in this offseason. All they've done is lost Grady Jarrett, right?
Yeah.
So they add Jalen Walker, they add James Pierce. Adding two unproven players for the price of two first round picks and a second round pick, I don't think that's the best process if you're Atlanta. Um, Even though, like, I very clearly value both Jalen Walker and James Pierce. They are both top 10 players on my personal big board, right? I question the process if you're Terry Fontenot. It's interesting for sure, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out because it's two players that I think are among the most talented in the draft. It's just the Falcons. I'm not sure that it's a move that I would have made, kind of risking your future on a lot of unproven
Wow.
assets on your team. Oh, wait, what's up? What'd you just see?
I just saw the Ravens pick. I don't know if you've already seen it or not, but not back to back years,
I see
but
it now. Yeah, I
I
see it.
started doing my own draft evaluation in 2022. And in that class, I had Kyle Hamilton as the number one player, like easy number one player for me. He ends up falling to, I think, 14, and the Ravens take him. Malachi Starks this year, I had he was my eighth overall player, so a top 10 player.
Nice.
And the fact that the Ravens get these guys that fall because they are safeties and they just get like such top end talent. They're showing the Oregon interception, which I believe I sent to you and Steve when we were looking at Malachi Starks early in the 2 point conversion draft guide process. He's just a phenomenal player, and I think getting Starks, the Ravens just or getting him and Hamilton, the Ravens just continue to add good players. And it's really paid dividends for him, right? They're not the team that focuses on premium picks in the first round, and it just pays off for him. And he's going to a defense with Roquan Smith. They took Nate Wiggins last year, who had quite the good rookie year, especially down the stretch. I think Marlon Humphrey was a second team All Pro. Kyle Hamilton's the best safety in the league to me. Really, really phenomenal secondary and front on the defense.
Yeah.
The sky's the limit for them this year. I know that they're disappointed about the Buffalo Bills playoff loss. Mark Andrews obviously dropping the 2 point conversion, but I mean, this is as home run a pick as you can get for me. He and Jihad Campbell are the last top 10 players for me at this point. Campbell obviously has the labrum surgery question. I think he's going to end up falling out of the first round. But what an awesome pick for the Ravens here.
Yeah, this is a phenomenal value at where they're getting them, even if it's a safety. Like, I think one of the things that Malachi Starks is going to give the Ravens that they, I think, really missed this past year is, Marcus Williams was like fine, but
Mhm.
towards the end of last year, they were playing Kyle Hamilton as their over the top safety quite a bit, and it's just not the ideal spot that you want him. You want him like being a mismatch against like an offensive playmaker type, against
Mhm.
like a Sean Payton Joker type, right? I think that, with Malachi Starks, it really opens up how you're able to use a guy like Kyle Hamilton. And it's kind of like an accelerant, right? Like Malachi Starks to most teams probably isn't worth a first round pick simply because of the positional value of safety, but it's a really good value. I think the Ravens, they consistently hit on these guys that fall because of positional value, right? Kyle Hamilton, Tyler Linderbaum. There's just plenty of examples, right? Their process is among the best, if not the best, in the NFL at evaluating talent, letting that talent fall to you throughout the draft, and just kind of developing those guys. So I think this is a home run pick, easy A plus for the Ravens.
Absolutely. I just saw the little nugget on the ticker at the bottom. First round wide receiver for the Packers since 2002. It's crazy there with Matthew Golden. But
Yeah,
as far as Starks goes, like you said it, Kyle Hamilton I think is best when he's closer to the line of scrimmage. He's really built like a fast linebacker or a big nickel linebacker who can just fly around and do whatever he wants. And to me, Malachi Starks' best position is at the deep third of the field, the free safety, just a true eraser, super fluid in
yeah.
coverage, and getting both of those guys that could play off of each other, just an incredible thing. Like, what do you want? Like, how can you attack them with deep or vertical concepts, right? When you have
Yeah,
two good corners and easily, like without a doubt, easily the best safety tandem in the league for me right now.
their entire secondary is just
Yeah,
stacked. right? They
And
have
then Roquan Smith in the middle, right? And
yeah,
then an impressive defensive front. Like this is a team
yeah,
that's built to compete in the regular season and in the playoffs against because you have to go against Mahomes, right? You have to go
yeah.
against Josh Allen. If Joe Burrow ever sneaks in, like you have to go against him and Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, since they re-signed him. Having a stout, not just defense but secondary in particular, is a piece that a lot of AFC teams need, and I think they're going to be the best at it in this upcoming season. I might pre-fire a take or a perfect take for my podcast, Perfect Takes, that the Ravens might have the best secondary in the league this year.
Let's take it back to a few of the earlier picks, right? We hit a lot on Travis Hunter. We talked a little bit about Abdul Carter. What are some of the, let's narrow it down to skill position players, and we'll
Mhm.
exclude Ted McMillan from this, right? Let's kind of talk about just Ashton Genty to the Raiders right now, because I think that's one of the most intriguing picks in this entire draft. I think it's going to be a case study on, positional value moving forward. Ashton Genty, I think, is probably, and I think you agree on this, the third best player in this draft class, right?
Uh,
He
I disagree. I think he's the second best, but yeah,
second best. So you have him above Carter, presumably.
correct. Yeah.
So, like probably the best, like sole offensive player in this draft class, if you're assuming that Hunter is going to play both ways. I think that the Raiders, their run game was one of the worst we've ever seen.
Abysmal. Yeah.
Abysmal. They were trotting out like Madden creative players at running back last year. Their offensive line, really struggled down the stretch, especially the interior of their offensive line. I know they have some plans in place that they're going to continue to build on. Like, Jackson Powers Johnson is going to grow for them as a guard center. I'm not sure what they see, as his future position, but he's going to continue to grow. I think this is just a interesting case study on how much can a running back accelerate an offense, right? They added Geno Smith. They don't really have any weapons outside of, Brock Bowers, Jacoby Myers. Um, I think it's going to be interesting to see and track how good the Raiders' run game is from an efficiency standpoint in particular. We probably know that the Raiders are going to give Genty 20, 25 touches a game, right? It's going to be how efficient can the Raiders be on those touches in particular. So just a kind of a fascinating pick with the Raiders. I want to get your thoughts on Las Vegas taking Genty.
I think it's a statement pick, right? We talked about how, or I think you talked about it on your mock draft episode back on Tuesday, but as a young GM, having picks on your resume that are like the bulletproof pick, like the proven player that can make an impact. We talked about it with the Jacksonville Jaguars, but the Raiders GM, John Spytek, is new as well. And I think having a guy that can come in, be the face of the offense, maybe the face of the franchise as a young player, be a real tone setter. I think the thing with Genty is he's not only like a super efficient, super good runner, but he's a tough runner too. Like he likes to take on contact. He breaks through tackles. That's what I envision the I was going to say Oakland Raiders, but the Las Vegas Raiders being is like the tough, gritty team that's never an easy win for teams when they go into Las Vegas. I think he can remake that image for him. Pete Carroll, right? When the Seahawks were at their best, when they were winning Super Bowls, they had a guy who could break 10, maybe 15 tackles on certain runs that are called beast quakes and take him to the house. That's kind of the same style Ashton Genty can play with. I really think that he can be like the bulletproof pick for the GM, the face of the offense, and get their run game moving. And the last thing I'll say is, even though they were poor run blockers last year, we saw a couple instances where Boise State played against like real competition, if you want to say that, in Oregon and in Penn State. Those O lines got abused in those games, and Ashton Genty was still turning out 100-yard rushing games, one or two touchdown games there. So I think he's kind of scheme agnostic, immune to whatever O line is in front of him. I think he's that special of a player. I think when you're trying to remake a team, because I think for the large part, or for the most part, the Raiders are having a huge makeover this offseason. I think when you get a guy that can be your face, that can get the ball 25, even 30 times a game, and just kind of set the tone for your offense, I think you have to go with that. And so I really like the Genty pick. I've had them taking Genty in two of my mocks. The only mock that I didn't have them taking him in was like the the unexpected or the chaos mock. So I've been kind of seeing this one, and maybe it's because the GM's like, oh, we love running backs, right? We love Ashton Genty. We don't hate taking running backs in the first round. I feel like he's had to tell us that throughout the process, and it just so happens to come true on draft night. He was telling us all along.
Yeah, it's a he was talking about like his kid like being gonna be
Yeah.
mad if they didn't take Genty, and you've got Pete Carroll like posting gifs on Twitter like trying to hint at who it's going to be. So I think it's a fun pick. I think Raiders fans should be incredibly excited about Ashton Genty. Let's talk Colston Loveland, and
Mhm.
really we can kind of make this a larger conversation between him and Tyler Warren. So Loveland goes top 10, 10th overall of the Chicago Bears, and then Tyler Warren goes 14th to the Indianapolis Colts. Both, I think, are interesting fits. Let's start with Loveland. What do you make of Ben Johnson getting yet another playmaker, probably the best middle of the field target in this draft class, in my opinion?
I think it kind of shows what he wants to do with Caleb Williams. A lot of Caleb Williams struggles were holding the ball too long, trying to access stuff deep downfield that just wasn't open. And that would end up with him taking sacks. Loveland can maybe open that intermediate area of the field, be like the safety blanket for Caleb Williams this year. I had thought that maybe Tyler Warren was the guy because Ben Johnson likes to use his players in unique ways. Tyler Warren is probably the most unique usage player. I thought that was a natural marriage there, but they end up going with Loveland, who I think probably has the better ceiling as a receiver long term. And I think when you have a young QB like that, excuse me, that you want to believe in, you give him the better receiver long term. Whereas when you get to Warren, I think Warren can actually do more for the Colts offense, considering the run game that both Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones can present. But I'm not surprised Loveland went ahead of Warren. I think if you listen to stuff like the Athletic Football Show, where Dane Brugler talks, or where Daniel Jeremiah talks on his media stuff, I think the league was shifting more toward Loveland as the traditional pass catching tight end, and maybe viewed Warren as more of the gimmick player. And so I'm not super shocked that it turned out that way, but I like the fit for both teams.
Yeah, I think Loveland is incredibly exciting as just a high upside bet on a receiving tight end. I think isn't really close to what he's going to be as
Mhm.
as his peak. Tyler Warren, I think, is a little bit more just interesting because I was kind of the mindset that I don't think the Colts needed to take another type of player that they couldn't get the ball to. They already had Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, AD Mitchell. Uh, Alec Pierce, you could throw him in there. He was actually their leading receiver last year. They have, you know, Jonathan Taylor at running back as well. So they have all of these offensive weapons. So adding a tight end like Warren, I didn't think that should have necessarily been a priority. Still, I think he's a really fun player. Like he's somebody that you can design touches to. I think he's very athletic, one of the more athletic tight ends that I think I've scouted, at least in terms of play speed. He he's really unique as a player because his usage, like you said, a lot of it was scripted at
Mhm.
Penn State. And really the majority of it was scripted. It's not something that you really ever see outside of like, him, and I guess Harold Fannin was sort of the same way at Bowling Green as well. So I I'm interested to see how he translates to the NFL. He's an older prospect, but I think if you're the Colts, it's at least an exciting pick. I'm not sure that I would have made the same one. I probably would have opted for, maybe Gray Zabel, maybe another offensive lineman, because they lost Ryan Kelly, their center. They lost Will Fries, their guard. Both of those guys got, at least Fries got a pretty substantial deal. Ryan Kelly was, more of a mid-tier type of contract, but I think that they really needed to beef up the offensive line before kind of shoring up this tight end room, and I think we'll see how it pans out. I'm just a little bit skeptical at the moment.
Especially in this class where outside of Tyler Booker, who goes 12 overall, I think that's another
Yeah,
a riser, late riser, if you will, and Gray Zabel. After that, I'm just not super sold on any of the interior guys. Donovan Jackson went in the first round as well. That would have been my next one. So I think in this class, at least Tyler Warren can he can do some blocking for you, right? Maybe he can pull and help the left guard in the center if they need to. But it seemed like a bit of a luxury pick for a team that number one doesn't have their like established QB of the future. Number two, I think still has some questions on defense, particularly at the linebacker spot. This could have been a Jalen Walker team as well, in my opinion. It's interesting to say the least, but I think it's not a. I don't think it's a bad pick. Like Warren can do some stuff for them right away, especially in the run game with the QBs, because both QBs are quite athletic, quite capable as runners. I think that's where we're going to see Warren really thrive to start the year. Maybe on some RPO stuff like block and then leak out for a pass or something like that. But it's
Yeah.
yeah, like I don't hate the pick for them, but I agree with you. I think I would have gone in a different direction.
Let's talk D line. Obviously, this is a huge like class when it came to defensive line, edge talent. We've seen several guys go. I'm just going to list them in order, and then we can talk about like more specific ones with tricky landing spots. We already hit on Michael Williams at 11, so maybe not him,
Mhm.
but obviously Abdul Carter at the top at number 3 overall to the New York Giants. We had Mason Graham. We hit on him a little bit earlier too to the Cleveland Browns. We have let's see, Kenneth Grant to Miami Dolphins. I think that's a fun fit. Walter Nolan, your guy to the Arizona Cardinals. Shamar Stewart, really athletic player. We'll see how he develops in Cincinnati. Derek Harmon, he went to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And James Pierce so far to the Atlanta Falcons. And then another one, recent pick. We haven't hit on this. It just happened. Tyleik Williams from Ohio State goes to the Detroit Lions with the 28th overall pick.
Yeah, I like the Tyleik Williams pick. I didn't know if more than four interior guys would go in round one, but I think he was naturally the next player. If he hadn't hurt himself at the pro day, I think he probably would have been closer to a lock in the first round. But the early run on defensive tackles, I think, probably spurred this. I like the fit there. My favorite one, you mentioned it, Walter Nolan. I've been top five with him throughout the entire process. I might be the only person who's that high on Walter Nolan. I believe in his upside and going to a place where in Arizona where they invested in the front and free agency, right? With Josh Sweat, Dalvin Tomlinson. They take Darius Robinson from Missouri, I think 2 years ago as their rookie. They have some players in place. So Nolan doesn't have to be immediate super contributor. He can learn from the guys around him. He can help the guys around him with his unique rushing ability. I think he's super explosive. I really, really like that one. And then Shamar Stewart to the Cincinnati Bengals. That's a Bengals pick, right? Really big edge rusher, athletic is the calling card for him. Similar how they took Miles Murphy a couple years ago. I don't know if it's going to work out for him. Miles Murphy didn't work out for him. Sam Hubbard is retired, so they certainly need the production from Shamar Stewart. And if there's one thing Shamar Stewart didn't do this year in college, it was produce and finish plays. So I'm intrigued to see how that one works out. I'm probably lowest on that one, but I like a lot of the fits for the defensive linemen so far in the draft.
Yeah, this seemed like a very typical pick by the Bengals. I was kind of
Hmm.
surprised that they went with such a raw player with the 17th overall pick. I honestly thought they should have gone with, a more proven talent that's kind of produced at the NFL level, maybe a James Pierce, or not NFL level, college level, excuse me. Maybe a James Pierce, maybe a Derek Harmon. That's who I really thought they were going to end up
Hmm.
taking was Derek Harmon, maybe even Walter Nolan. I kind of think that Shamar Stewart, while I think that he's easily a first round talent in my opinion. Like he's very clearly talented. He's incredibly athletic, one of the two best athletes in this draft class. I think that if you're the Bengals, when you have this record setting poor defense, you just needed somebody that you knew could produce. And I'm just
Hmm.
not sure that Shamar Stewart's going to be that. Maybe you could tell yourself that, okay, bare minimum, he's going to provide a pocket pushing presence. He's going to get after it in the run game. Sure, I could kind of see that, but it's just I would want a little bit more assurance that this guy is going to give you something in year one because I kind of think that coaching staff is on a ticking clock. Um,
Hmm.
they haven't really done much the past few years, and I think that if you're Zach Taylor in that Bengals head coaching spot, another year probably in the not making the playoffs is going to really it's going to make it hard for you to be retained and taking a raw player like this that I'm not sure is going to contribute from the jump is probably not something that I would have done.
Yeah, that was a sneaky before the season ended. I thought that could be a sneaky Ben Johnson spot or Liam
Yeah.
Cohen spot, just because they haven't really produced. I think he's living off of the Super Bowl appearance. And I think when you see a lot of players on, especially on offense, because he calls the offensive plays, when you see a lot of players get big time paydays, I think that means like, oh, we must be doing something. And while the offense does do stuff, it doesn't necessarily equate to wins just because how bad their defense is. And so I think he could be on the way out. I don't know who the next like Ben Johnson is or Liam Cohen is. I don't know who's going to be available, but that would be a spot that I would certainly keep my eyes on going forward. And I want to interject with the Bills pick that's come in. Um, the corner was a popular spot with them, and they end up taking the fastest man at the combine, Maxwell Hairston. This I'm getting shades of Kyer Elam with this pick. Both speedy corners that are a little bit rough around the edges, need a little bit of refinement, and I thought that maybe they would go a more athletic or prototypical player at this position because that's what Brandon Bean tends to do. But I'm curious to see how Hairston pairs with Christian Benford with the Bills and ends up working out for them this season because I think I'm not super sold on Maxwell Hairston. If I had to pick any of the top 7 or 8 corners in this class, he'd be probably my least favorite. But he made it to the draft, or he was invited to the draft for a reason. He ends up going in round 1, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on Hairston because I think both of us pegged him as somebody that could go in round 1, especially after the combine. But what are your thoughts with Hairston to the Buffalo Bills?
Yeah, so in my final mock, he was somebody that was invited to the combine. I thought the NFL was probably going to have more interest than what the average person or average media member thought he was going to go. I had him at 19 to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I thought that was pretty high for him. 30, I can kind of sell myself on a little bit more. Our friend Steve, who did the defensive backs for the draft guide, he is not a Hairston guy. I think he had like a 3rd round grade on him. Obviously, the speed really stands out when you watch Hairston, but it's kind of he's kind of Dante Jackson ish when
Yeah.
he gets burned quite a bit. He's an advantageous corner, like he's very opportunistic in kind of attacking the ball, but in doing so, he leaves himself vulnerable to big plays, which I don't love. If you're the Buffalo Bills, I think this is also a pick where you have Von Miller, you have Joey Bosa now, you have some interesting pieces on that defensive line. Greg Rousseau, obviously. I think with these faster corners, you can maybe sell yourself on the fact that, okay, we're going to get to the passer a little bit quicker than most teams. So as long as we have a guy that's keeping up with a lot of these, faster receivers, then I think that you can justify that pick in your head a little bit more. I think it's just such a desperate need. Like they had Kyer Elam was just there were highlight reels of him getting burned against the Chiefs in the playoffs, right?
Mhm.
It was really bad. This is a pick where it's very clear they needed a corner. Hairston is probably the top guy that was left on NFL boards in particular. I personally prefer Will Johnson by quite a bit at this, overall
Oh,
pick.
Will Johnson's still available. I hadn't thought
Still
about that.
available.
He,
Yeah.
he might be he and Jihad Campbell might be fallers in this year's class.
We'll talk about we only have 2 picks left. The Eagles just traded up 1 spot to 31 overall, but we'll hit on like the kind of best available after these last few picks roll in. But I think Harrison's interesting, not the bet I would have made at 30 overall.
Yeah. Well, how much of it do you think is, oh my goodness, Xavier Worthy torched us on that first drive. Let's get a fast corner that can keep up with him going forward. I think there's a little bit of that there. But I don't think that's something you should bet on, or like that's not the number one factor you should consider with your first round pick, especially when I think players like Will Johnson are better. I think Jihad Campbell could be the long-term Matt Milano replacement. So that could have been a direction they go in. But Hairston, I think, certainly earned his way to the first round with his combine performance. With his, I don't think he led FBS in interceptions this year, but he had quite a few. So I don't want to say he's not worthy being a first round pick. I just don't think he would be the pick that both you and I would have made for the Bills here.
I think it makes more sense when you look at who the Bills are going to have to match up against in the playoffs in particular. Like, let's say Miami, for instance, they have Tyreek Hill, they have Jalen Waddle. You look at Denver, Pittsburgh, they have, DK Metcalf, a few faster guys there. Houston has a really big, outside threat that's really good over the middle, and Deco Collins, maybe Tank Dell recovers a little bit. Baltimore, they need somebody that can cover a guy like Zay Flowers, right? So there's a ton of guys, and obviously you mentioned Xavier Worthy, where you theoretically could pin Hairston as a matchup for those types of players. But I think for them to take him this early, I even like Trey Amos a little bit more than Maxwell Hairston. It's not the bet I would have made. I can see their justification for taking him this early, but I just think it's a little bit rich. But I also want to, once again, it's been a while since we plugged it. I kind of want to go over it a little bit more. The draft guide that we have, right? We put, a ton of work into it. So if you have not already, go check it out, 2pointconversion.com/shop, or you can scan this QR code and it'll take you to the shop and you can get yourself a draft guide. We put a ton of time, resources into it. It looks just beautiful. Colt did an incredible job with the graphics, and really, like, the entire graphics for our website are just phenomenal. Like, some of the graphics that he's putting out are just, we have an entire page of our website just dedicated to the graphics that our designer Colt has been putting out. Like, he's just done a phenomenal job with the artistic direction of what we've been going for. So if you haven't already, check out our draft guide. There's 100 plus profiles, 100 plus comparisons, 170 total players ranked. There's a lot of information in there. So check it out if you have not already. Has this Eagles pick rolled in yet?
Not for me. And I was going to say with the draft guide, I was just looking. Maxwell Hairston is one of our first third round pick players. I think he was 60th on our draft guide. And I think that makes him, at least on the draft guide, the highest jump so far of any player. Maybe Josh Connerly, I think, might be down there. We didn't really talk about that with Washington, but I love anything that's going to help Jaden Daniels continue to grow. So I like that pick there. But I'm looking at Jackson Dart. Jackson Dart would have been the lowest guy, 71 on our list, and he makes it in.
We need to tag Eagles.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet. They're still walking to the stage. But if you're going to trade up one spot with Kansas City, right, it must be somebody that Kansas City would have considered.
It's a fun one. So I don't think –
I see.
Yeah. So that the Eagles have selected Alabama linebacker Jihad Campbell. Super fun player. You love Jihad Campbell. Yeah. He's a top 32 player on my board as well. The Eagles just kind of get richer, right? They had 20 picks over the next 2 years to spend, and they move up one pick, even if they had to spend a 5th round pick to make it happen. This is a phenomenal value, even if Jihad Campbell is somebody that, has injury concerns, maybe a lesser position in terms of the value that you're getting. He is just supremely talented, incredibly athletic, somebody that's, he's a see ball, get ball type of linebacker, not somebody that's going to necessarily diagnose what's going to happen on offense, but he's the type of player who is going to get there incredibly quick. And he's one of the best modern type of linebackers that we've seen in recent memory coming into the draft. So I really like the Eagles adding him to a linebacker room that has Nakobe Dean, they have Zach Bond, and now they have Jihad Campbell.
Yeah, Campbell, top 10 player for me, and maybe I'm a little bit biased there, but he's just a destroyer. He's going to seek out, and just anything in front of him is not going to get past him. He's a surefire tackler. As soon as he steps in the league, once he recovers from labrum surgery, it's going to be one of the 2 or 3 fastest sideline-to-sideline players in the entire National Football League. I really like him learning behind Zach Bond, who was an All-Pro this year. Nakobe Dean really came on before he got injured for the Eagles. So, like you're saying, Super Bowl winners, the rich get richer. I thought that they would take the best edge rusher that fell to them, because there's going to be I thought there would be 7 or 8 edge rushers taken. I think we're only at 6 so far. But I really, really love this fit for him. I think to this point, the only green room people we have left are Jalen Milrow and Will Johnson. So there's somebody's not going to make it on night one between those two. But really, really love the fit here. I think if the labrum surgery weren't on the table, we would have seen Jihad Campbell go potentially within the top 20 picks.
Yeah, I think that the NFL liked Jihad Campbell as a player, right? It was just the injuries and the fact that he was a linebacker already maybe kind of dropped him down a little bit. But Howie Roseman's gonna do Howie Roseman things, and this is phenomenal value for the Eagles. I think that he adds another skill set to that linebacking room that they didn't really have. I think that both Nakobe Dean and Zach Bond are pretty unique players. So getting a modern type of linebacker that's going to be able to match up against tight ends, running backs is going to be really good in coverage. I think from the jump, Jihad Campbell's just an excellent value here for the Eagles for sure.
Yeah, who do you if you haven't seen the Chiefs pick already, I haven't seen it yet. Who do you think this is going to be? Like I'm getting shades of, and I hope they do this just for the chaos and the mayhem. I'm getting shades of them taking a running back at pick 32. Like I think Travion Henderson would be quite the fun pick there. But the Chiefs are a sneaky team that have a lot of needs, right? Like offensive line needs to be something. I think defensive line, maybe defensive back as well. So I think I believe Josh Simmons is still available from Ohio State. I think that could be a direction they lean in with the 32nd pick if they stay there.
Maybe this is we talked on the podcast a while ago about just a weird right tackle usually sneaks into the first round every year. Maybe this is the Ozzie Trapillo pick out of Boston College. Let's see. It could be
or Ariante Ursery from Minnesota.
Yeah, maybe Marcus Mbao potentially. Jared Wilson. I don't think Jared Wilson's going to go because they already have a center. I think Travion Henderson's probably who I would guess because they had a really late Zoom call with him. They had a Zoom call with him on Tuesday actually, which is that always kind of perks my ears up when a team meets with somebody this late in the process. It kind of happened with the Patriots and Will Campbell. They went to Louisiana to meet with him one last time before the draft this week. So I kind of think it's going to be a guy like Henderson just because they met with him so late.
And especially, I believe the deadline for 30 visits was last Thursday, a week ago today. So once you have the people in your building and then they're like, oh, wait, we need to do our due diligence on this guy, that raises red flags, right? So I'm with you. I think Travion Henderson would be fun, but I really think they have a lot of other needs, right? Just signing Jalen Moore from the 49ers doesn't necessarily move me. I think he played 200 snaps at tackle this past season. So I think Josh Simmons from Ohio State could be there if they're checked out on his medicals. Will Johnson, the corner, I think can make a lot of sense here. Who's another faller so far?
So I'm not sure. Yeah, so they're announcing it as we speak. I know who the pick is. I'm just going to wait till he says it on my stream before I say it. But it is, I'll say, at least an offensive lineman. You've got Josh Simmons out of Ohio State. So I'm going to update this ticker with the last two picks. I'll let you talk on Josh Simmons.
Yeah, I really like him as a player. Had the injured patella, which is your kneecap, and anytime you have something that serious, it garners concern, right? You can't necessarily brush that away. But with modern medicine, with players recovering faster and faster, I think if they're cleared on his medicals, you might be getting the best left tackle, at least the best left tackle in the class. This is somebody that in my final mock I had the Chiefs trading up for, I think with the Los Angeles Rams, but here they get him at pick 32. I think if he can come in and play as well as he did prior to his injury this season, he can be the easy year one starter for the Chiefs. And this is something that the Chiefs have been trying to solve for the last 2 or 3 years now, right? They take 2 years ago, Wanya Morris. They take Kingsley Suamataia last year from BYU. I believe both second round, or Wanya Morris might have been a fourth rounder. But now, I think he round 3, round 4. But now they are willing to use the first round pick to try to solve this. Both times Mahomes has lost in the Super Bowl, he's gotten fried by the defense. The Buccaneers defense was that super team. And then with the Eagles this year, They Mahomes had 42 dropbacks. They blitzed on 0% of the dropbacks. They rushed 4 every single time and just were crushing the offensive line. So if you want to stay competitive, if you want to keep the Super Bowl window open, you got to let Mahomes do what he does, and the best way to do that is with an offensive lineman.
Yeah, Josh Simmons, I think, is one of the most talented offensive linemen in this entire draft class, right? A lot of people would tell you that, had he never gotten hurt, he probably would have been the fourth overall pick to the New England Patriots, right?
Mhm.
I don't think it's unfair to say that, but obviously the injury is going to really concern people. I think the Chiefs really needed another bet at offensive line, and Andy Reid is somebody that is going to continually swing at the offensive line positions until he has 5 guys that he really likes. And Simmons is as good as a talent as you're going to get with 32nd overall. I don't think he makes sense for a lot of teams. I see a lot of draft Twitter people in particular kind of clamoring for him to go higher than 32nd overall. But in reality, if you're a general manager, you're never guaranteed the next draft. And, if Kansas City is in a unique position where, they are pretty much guaranteed to be, picking next year, no matter what happens. So for them to take a player who has injury concerns, it's more understandable than, say the I'm just trying to come up with another team that needed a tackle, for instance, but maybe like the Texans, for instance, if they had a
Mhm.
really rough season, Casario theoretically could have been out, right? Um, I think that's not out of the realm of possibility. It's probably unlikely, but um, Josh Simmons, really talented player. I want to talk about some of the players that weren't picked today. There's a big list on ESPN's just best available. We'll start with the quarterbacks, right? Shador Sanders is not picked. I don't think that was necessarily unexpected in our circle, right?
Mhm.
Tyler Shuck, not drafted. Jalen Milrow, not drafted on day one. We'll start with the quarterbacks. Do you think Shador Sanders is likely to go to the Cleveland Browns at the 33rd overall pick?
Uh, do the Browns still hold the 33rd overall pick? I'm assuming.
Yes. So they
I,
have 33 and 36 now.
oh, that's right, with the Jacksonville trade.
Yeah.
Yeah, I might stake my claim and say that that's the likely pick. They waited, right? They got me. I was gonna say they have Travis Hunter, they could reunite him. That's not what happened, right? They had the trade.
Right.
So I'm not sure if that's necessarily going to be the pick. Uh, the Browns' offensive coordinator, Tommy Reese, was Jalen Milrow's offensive coordinator in 2023 with Alabama. So maybe one of those two picks is QB. I don't think that they have to go QB in general, right? I'm not saying Joe Flacco or Kenny Pickett are long-term guys, but maybe they think that if they continue to build the team, next year might be the year. I know you and I talked about how there's probably going to be a couple teams that think next year's the year, right? With Arch Manning or
Yeah.
Lenore Sellers, Carson Beck, all the QBs there. But I would expect that all three of those QBs you mentioned, Sanders, Milrow, and even Shuck, even though I'm not a big Tyler Shuck fan, I think we're going to see them all off the board within probably the first 50 or like pick 50, pick 52, something like that.
Right.
For a lot of these teams that missed QBs, like the Browns, the Saints, and a team like maybe for the future, if Jalen Milrow falls to the Rams' newly acquired second round pick, that could be something. But
Yeah.
I think the Steelers are the most interesting team with QB. Didn't take one and still don't have a second round pick. So I'm kind of
Yeah.
thinking, what's the plan there?
Yeah. They don't pick until pick number 83 in the third round. Going just through the first few picks in the second round, Cleveland at 33, and the Giants, Titans, the Giants, Titans, and then the Browns again, followed by the Raiders, Patriots, Bears, Saints, and then Bears again. So you have two teams that have 4 picks in the first, I don't know, 9-ish picks, right? With Cleveland and Chicago both holding 2. Um, it's gonna be interesting to see. Excuse me, instead of the Giants picking at 34, it's the Minnesota Vikings. I keep messing
Right.
up this order.
With the
Tank,
Jackson Dart trade.
right. Tankathon has not updated this order quite yet. Um, I think that you could see, maybe 2 quarterbacks going in that group of picks. I think Shador Sanders is probably pretty likely to go at one of these 2 Browns picks, right? Either 33 or 36. And then, you know, maybe they take a Travion Henderson, maybe they take a tackle prospect, something like that. Even a wide receiver, since they ended up not taking Travis Hunter, I could see that. But I do think that Sanders is pretty likely to be a Brown by the end of tomorrow.
Yeah, I really like that one. I'm going through my personal board, which might not match up with yours, but I'm looking at some of the people who haven't gone. I'm just trying to gauge your range on people like Will Johnson, Luther Burden, Donovan Ezeraku, who I know you were much lower on, and
I was
probably
very low
feel
on him.
you
Yeah.
feel convicted after the first night that
I mean,
your I get your evaluation of him came true. He wasn't a true first rounder, and then yeah, like Travion Henderson, I guess would be the other
yeah.
guy.
I don't want to victory lap a guy not going round
Right.
one, but I did have like major questions about Ezra potentially being drafted that high. Anytime you have like 6'2" guy, not like prototypical size, um, he's not necessarily the quickest off the ball, more of a technical type of guy. I always like that's kind of the alarm bell of like, this may not be the type of player that's just doesn't have the physical traits to translate to the NFL. And that was kind of my fear. Like, I think you have to have either size or be extremely quick off the ball. That's why I like Jalen Walker is, despite him, being 6'1", being 243 pounds, he's still incredibly quick, to engage the tackle, to kind of set up his pass rushing moves. And I just didn't quite see that with Ezra.
Yeah.
I think that he was a bit slower off the, like, that's just the big thing is like I love it. If you're a smaller edge rusher, you have to have burst, right? And he didn't have burst, he didn't have power. He's just a very technically refined guy. And that's fine if you're going to take him on, the latter half of day two, but it's not somebody that I'm going to sell myself on being a 3-down starter, which is really what I'm aiming for with like a top 60-ish overall pick.
For sure. I think our Panthers hold the 57th pick, and they had a 30 visit with him. That might be something there. But I agree with you. I think he probably had the best bend in the class. Maybe James Pierce had better bend. But after that, that's kind of it, right? If you're going to be a smaller guy, you have to be explosive. Josiah Stewart,
Yeah.
explosive, violent hand fighter. Jalen Walker, one of the more explosive athletes. Nolan Smith from a couple years ago, the other smaller Georgia guy. He wasn't as explosive, but he was a phenomenal run defender, really explosive in the run game, and so he found his way into the first round. I think you can explain away Ezra not making it, and then Will
Yeah.
Johnson. That's the perplexing one for me. I know
Mike,
there are
Mike
reports
Green to
like,
me.
oh, Mike Green as well. I forgot about Mike Green, but he had some pre-existing stuff, right? Like
Yeah, he did.
he wasn't full green flags, right? Maybe teams aren't as high on his off-field stuff, right? But Will Johnson, I saw reports that number one, he didn't run his 40. I don't think he worked out at Michigan's pro day, and then he didn't answer as to why he didn't do that. I saw reports that he didn't do that for teams that might have lowered him
Yeah.
off the board.
We know why. We know why.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. People crucified McMillan for having a slow 40 time, but still top 10 pick. I think Johnson had the talent to go in the first round, but if you don't check out the interview process with teams, maybe that just takes him off the board.
Yeah.
One of my buddies who's a Bills fan in the chat said that Brandon Bean indicated that they had a first round grade on Maxwell Hairston. I think we figured he would go first round. In my last mock draft, I had him going 33 to the Vikings who traded out. But him going in the first round, I don't think was a surprise, especially after that combine performance. But it's him versus Will Johnson. It's just the interesting juxtaposition to me.
There's a lot of talent left. I mean, this second round is probably like 25-ish players deep, if I
Mhm.
had to estimate, right? I'm just gonna go over like the ESPN like best available list. You have Will Johnson, Mike Green. I thought there was a chance Nick Emanwari would go first round just because of the testing
Mhm.
numbers. I thought the NFL would potentially be higher on him than media. He's been crucified by media a little bit. Ezra he's obviously still there. Darius Alexander thought he had a chance to
Yeah.
go, but He's still available. Travion Henderson, I thought the Broncos would take him at 20. I really did. He seemed like a Sean Payton type of back to me.
Well, I thought the Broncos would take Amarion Hampton. He made it that
Yeah,
far, and then they take Barron, right? The Texas
that was probably
back.
like my most unexpected pick of the night. Like that one
Yeah,
was not on my radar
especially
at
after
all.
their defensive spending. They focused on the back
Yeah,
seven. I think they got two starters from San Francisco in free agency, but the Broncos aren't really a team with a lot of holes. I think taking maybe the best player available is probably the best choice for them, and I think Amarian Hampton or I had him rated as a better player than Jedi Barron. Barron's pretty
yeah.
multiple, right? He can do a lot of things for a Vance Joseph defense that was pretty good last year, continues to grow. So I can understand the rationale with that pick.
Yeah, I mean I get it for sure. It's just I was not expecting that at all, to
Mhm.
be honest. Some other names, obviously Shador Sanders, we already covered. Savon Ravel out of ECU. He's somebody that I think could go pretty high on day two. The two tight ends, Mason Taylor, Elijah Arroyo, Trey Amos, I thought had a chance to go day one.
Yeah.
Same with Jaden Higgins as well, big receiver out of Iowa State. Trey Harris, another receiver, and obviously like the big one, he's probably the best player left on my board if I don't have it pulled up, but Luther Burden, like he is a really fun talent and somebody that's just electric with the ball in his hands. I think he won't make it past Tennessee at 35 if he's there. He just makes way too much sense with, I think the Titans team needs a lot more juice in their, weapons department, and he would certainly provide that.
Yeah, I think the Patriots pick right after them, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately for them, I think that would be a good fit there as well. Uh, Outside shot at like true wide receiver one potential for Burden if they can utilize him
Yeah.
correctly. Yeah, I like the part of me that hates taking Ted McMillan at 8 overall is like, oh man, Luther Burden and
Yeah.
all these guys are available in the second round. But I understand the wide receiver one ceiling with McMillan. But yeah, Burden, Ravel, the ECU corner. I didn't know until recently that he's going to be 24, or he is 24
Oh,
now that
I did not know
draft
that, honestly.
draft season out the drafts here. That might be a part of it. Plus the ACL surgery
Yeah.
like skill wise and technique wise, he's very, very good. But a year removed, or almost a year removed from playing, older prospect that might damper some people. Nick Scorton is another one that I know he
He
wasn't a lock for the first round, maybe in the same way that somebody like Ezuraku was, but I think he has the physicality, he has the frame, and he, like Shamar Stewart, he was misused at Texas A&M. I think he could be somebody. And the other person, Carson Swessinger, the UCLA
yeah,
linebacker. I thought he had like a stone's throw chance of making it into the first round, maybe with the Bills. But I think
maybe
he's
like
going to be somebody that's sought after within the first 10 to 12 picks tomorrow.
I'm looking at the edge rushers available tomorrow, right?
Yeah,
It's
especially for
ridiculous.
Carolina. Yeah.
It is ridiculous. So I like just looking at the list, I think there's maybe 15, 16 guys that could go on day two. I'm gonna read off the list, right? There's so many guys. Mike Green, obviously.
Mhm.
Ezra Okwu, we touched on him. Jordan Birch, I think, is going to go really high on day two, like first 10 picks probably.
Yeah.
Um, JT Tuimalau from Ohio State. Femi Odoleo from UCLA. I think that the NFL is certainly higher on him than we are. Nick Scorton, I think somebody's really going to sell themselves on the Purdue tape with him. Landon Jackson, Josiah Stewart, Braden Swinson. Stewart probably more of a round three, round four
I
type
think
of
his
guy.
pro day kind of hurt him with the 40
Yeah,
time.
the
Yeah.
the like he's
He's
I
faster than that. I don't understand it.
he I don't understand how that happened. He ran a 4.85 40 for those who don't know, and
But
he's a 6'1", 248-pound edge rusher, juiced up incredibly. I hope he's picked tomorrow so that we can talk about him. Like
mhm.
just incredibly talented, was productive all 4 years at Coastal Carolina and then Michigan. And, he's got a plethora of pass rushing moves. He's incredibly powerful, setting the edge in the run game. Despite his size, I think he is like an outside chance at becoming a starting edge rusher. He's like, I had a really high second round grade on him. Was one of my top 32 players, but he's probably my favorite player in this entire draft. So, um,
Princely Uman Mielen as well from Ole Miss.
so
That's
I
I think he's going to be more designated pass rusher, but once you get
yeah.
to day two, it's like you gotta pick what people are good at, right? Nobody's going to be a complete player, otherwise they would have been
So
taken in round one. So I think when you find a team that really needs the juice, that might be a guy that they look at.
so I can't remember who reported it. Um, so I don't even want to like. I'm going to preface it by saying that because I don't know how much truth there is. Frankly, my brain is kind of scrambled from all of the rumors that I've read. But
Mhm.
I do remember specifically seeing somewhere, can't remember who it was, that said that Princely Uman Mielen had a chance to fall to day three, with some like off the field type concerns. Um, I don't know how much truth there is to that, but it is in the back of my mind seeing him, as the 10th best edge rusher on this list. A lot of people like him on day two. But I did read that somewhere. I just can't remember who it was. I did try to look it up earlier today because I saw Panthers Twitter discussing him, but I could not find it.
Three players I'm really interested in if they actually go tomorrow, and if they do, where. Number one, Harold Fannin, the tight end from Bowling
Yeah,
Green.
for
Um,
sure.
I think he's all over the place, right? Most productive tight end season in FBS history, and yet it feels like he could have done more. Like I think if he were a better athlete, he could have done more. Dion Walker, the Kentucky nose tackle, who's like uh, uh 7 foot 10, 400 pounds, not like that, but he's a massive human being. If you need a true space eater nose tackle, that's the guy. And then Darian Porter. I know Steve at the 2 point conversion is he's
Big fan.
running
Big
victory
fan.
laps that he didn't go in day one, but a 24-year-old corner like Siobhan Ravel, but only one good year of starting at corner, and then 5 or maybe 4 good years of being an elite special teamer. Like those are three that, where is their range? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah. The conversation around Harold Fannin is so fascinating in particular, just because he's such a unique player.
Hmm.
And if you take him on day two, then you're basically saying that he's in your future plans as a potential starter, right?
Hmm.
Um, but he's so unique in that you take him and you have to kind of design part of your offense around him. And is a day two player really worth that sort of investment? I'm not sure. He's just super interesting to me. He would make sense to me, at least in Denver in particular. They have
Yeah.
Ingram, but I think long term he makes sense there. Looking at the list of receivers, Kyle Williams, I want to see where he ends up. Whether it's a lot of people are saying round two, early round two. I could see him really the entirety of day two could end up being his range where he could go at pick 35 to the Titans. He could also go pick like 100, right? So I think he's got a very wide range.
I think Troy Franklin is a good litmus test for somebody like that.
Yeah.
Last year's class, people talked about him as a potential like sneaking into the back end of the first, makes it all the way to I think the fifth or sixth pick on day three. I think a lot of times you have a wide range of outcomes if you aren't like an established receiver, right? We only saw, if you don't count Travis Hunter, we only saw three of them, right? McMillan, Golden, and Ekbuka. It's going to be interesting the way the receivers roll off the board. I like your
Yeah.
Luther Burden take that he might go within the first 5 or 6 picks to one of the young QB teams, but then Jaden Higgins, right, out of Iowa, Jalen Knoll from
Yeah.
Iowa State as well, I think could go quite early. And then there's just so many useful receivers in this class. I think,
Yeah.
like the running back class, I think we're going to see teams push it to day, or not day three, maybe round three or even day three, right? Maybe if you don't want to spend, for the Panthers, for example, I know we took a receiver, but if you don't want to spend a pick on somebody at 57, you could get somebody at pick 100, pick 75, or wherever the Panthers pick, just because
Yeah.
there's so many useful role players that can immediately step in and contribute in their rookie seasons.
One player that I think is probably going to be one of the first players off the board is Carson Schwestinger.
Mhm.
And it's mainly because after him, this linebacker class is horrendous. It
Yeah.
is really bad. After him, it's like, okay, you're kind of picking your flavor of which player that you want. Demetrius Knight has a lot of fans. He's also 25 years old and probably isn't going to be a third down linebacker. Chris Paul, he's a little bit undersized, 6'1". I say a little bit. He's 220 pounds. That's not great. Smile Mondin is kind of like a hybrid nickel type. Stutzman out of Oklahoma, he's athletic, but he can't really play in coverage like at all. So it's a bunch of interesting role players that can't like they're very limited after
Mhm.
Sweatshinger. So I think he is probably going to be one of the first like 3 to 5 players off the board just because you're not going to find a linebacker after him in this draft. So he's a very likely candidate for somebody moving up to, 34, 35, 36 and landing him. So
Yeah, I'm with you there. It's really rough after him with the linebackers. Like looking at the running backs, I want you to give me who you think are going to be the first three
oh,
off the board because I think we can agree Travion Henderson is probably going to be the first one off the board on day 2. But after
yeah,
that, you're looking at Quinshawn Judkins, the other Ohio State guy, Caleb Johnson, maybe a Cam Scadaboo team sneaks into the second round and takes him. But there are just so many running backs that I'm curious as to the order that they end up flying off the board because I think now that the first round's gone, the dam can kind of break with the running backs because there's so many. We could
yeah.
probably get 30 drafted, and now teams don't have to be like, oh well, I need to wait. They got their star player in the first round. Now the running backs can start flying.
Yeah, I'm going to exclude Henderson just because I think he's an obvious pick here. I think he could even be the 33rd pick to Cleveland. They need a running back. I think Caleb Johnson is going to be in play for both Bears selections at 39 and
Yeah.
41. Like he is a very clean fit in a Ben Johnson, wide zone type of offense. Dylan Sampson, I think, brings an element of explosiveness that teams are really going to covet in the second round. Like, he's only 5'8", 200. I think teams are gonna see the ability of Jabir Gibbs, of Devon Achane, James Cook. You can sell yourself on a smaller running back right now because of the success of those guys here recently. Whereas, like, even back in, like, let's say 2020, for instance, you weren't seeing players this small succeed at the running back position. So I think it's becoming more wide open how you can take advantage of these types of players in space. And I think Sampson kind of fits that mold. So I think he's one of the first 3. So him and Caleb Johnson, and then probably Quinshawn Judkins. I think somebody's really going to sell themselves on kind of the athletic ability. Judkins has been incredibly productive for 3 years in college. Wasn't the best fit at Ohio State. I think he ran into the offensive line more than he ran through the hole, probably. So I think he's going to be very like it's going to be dependent on where he lands in terms of how good he is, because I think he's the type where a lot of times you have a running back that can accelerate an offense, but a lot of times the running back's dependent on the offensive line, kind of like how Miles Sanders is, right? Where incredibly athletic, very physically gifted, but he went from the Eagles to the Panthers and he was one of the worst running backs in the league. I don't think that Judkins is quite to that extreme, but I do think that I probably wouldn't spend a second round selection on him if I didn't have the offensive infrastructure to support a player like that. So he's interesting to me, but I do think a team is going to sell themselves on his production, on his traits in the second round in particular.
Yeah, he had a really good year at Ole Miss before he came to Ohio State, right? And I think that maybe having to share with somebody as talented as Henderson and not get into a rhythm might have tampered his ability to see the hole. Maybe I don't know.
He was
Uh,
trying to hit home runs the entire time.
yeah, and trying to because Henderson's a home run hitter, right? And I don't think Judkins necessarily had the juice to do that all the time, but we'll have to see there. The only other question I would have is like, what team interests you the most on day 2? Because we have teams that, after doing some first round trades, have some capital to do some damage on day 2, and there are teams that still have quite a few needs that they have to address. And I think day 2 you can still go best player available, but you really can start to slide into the all right, we took the high potential guys or the best players available in round one. Now we need to have people to fit our team to field a 53 once the season starts.
Yeah, it's. I think the Seahawks stand out quite a bit. They have 2 second-round picks. They have 2 third-round picks from the DK Metcalf and Geno Smith trades. So a lot of their offseason just kind of hinges on really day two in particular, right? Having sent those assets away for these types of selections. I think they have a lot of needs. Like I think they need another outside receiver, somebody that's kind of physical at the ball point, and somebody that can kind of just go up and get it. They have a lot of inside talent with Cooper Cup, with JSN. They really need a boundary receiver and in bad fashion. So maybe it's a Jaden Higgins type of destination. Um, I think that the Seahawks could also be a sneaky spot for a quarterback on day two. Maybe like Tyler Shuck makes it to pick 50, or maybe it's a Jalen Milrow on the scene behind Sam Darnold. Actually, really intrigues me. If Sam Darnold doesn't work out, which we've been a part of that experiment before. He's not going to have the Monstars around him like he did in Minnesota. So I think it's pretty likely that he's not going to be there for more than a few years. Hoping it works out for him, but I think that a bet at quarterback in the second round wouldn't be the worst thing for them. They need a tight end. Maybe they're a Mason Taylor type of destination, and then I think another offensive lineman somewhere on day two is probably in order as well.
Yeah, I like the Seattle shout. Arizona to me is also intriguing. I really thought that they would try to help the back end on day one. I think they took a really, really good value in Walter Nolan. Like I said, my fifth overall
Yeah.
player. But I think they have quite a few needs and question marks they have to address. This is a division that I think outside of the Rams should be pretty wide open. I think any of those three teams can compete for wild card spots. And if you're going to commit to Kyler, if you're going to build around him with Marvin Harrison Jr., I believe they just made Trey McBride the highest paid tight end in the league, if not the second highest. So if you're going to
Sure.
commit to that core, what's the next step, right? Can they get a wide receiver too? Because I like Michael Wilson, but I don't think he is a high end receiver too, right? Or what's their
Yeah.
secondary going to look like? Nicky Manwari is still on the board. I'm looking at the Cardinals picks. They have pick 47, so I'm not sure if he'd be in play there, but I think they have a lot of question marks like on the outsides or like on the deep part of both teams, receiver, DB. I think their trenches have been pretty well invested, so looking to see what they do.
They need as Matt Harmon would say, a sacrificial X receiver, kind of free up
Yeah.
Marvin Harrison a little bit more. I think, I mentioned Jaden Higgins for a team like the Seahawks. Looking at the list of receivers, um, obviously, Ted McMillan, not going to be there, can't be there. Jack Besh, he's more of a, power slot guy. Maybe Trey Harris makes a little bit of sense for the Arizona Cardinals. Torrey Horton, if they took a guy on day three, could make a lot of sense. Um, yeah, I think that the Cardinals are a really intriguing team because they have a lot of positions where it's kind of like a blank canvas.
Mhm.
They still need a corner desperately. They need multiple corners, actually. I could see them, maybe that's like the Savon Ravel team, get a win now type of player, even though it's like an injury bet. Um, maybe they're the Will Johnson team if they could trade up for him potentially, or Trey Amos or something. But yeah, I think they could go in a variety of directions.
For sure. Last thing for me, who do you want the Panthers to take? I mean, we have a depth of options there. Do you think we're going to move up from 57? I think that Dan Morgan's probably not content waiting 49 picks between picks, but if there's this many good players, I think they could stick and pick.
I think they end up trading up. Mike Kay, the reporter out of the Charlotte Observer, has been pretty adamant that 8 to 57 is just kind of a
It's
wide
rough.
gap.
Yeah.
It's tough to see all of these players come off the board. They have 2 4th round picks that are pretty early. Sending away like it's 114 and 111, if I'm not mistaken. Sending one of those picks away could probably get them to 49, 50-ish, I think. Um, in that range, I think they still need a tight end that they could add. Maybe it's Arroyo, maybe it's Terrence Ferguson. Maybe 57 is a little bit too rich for guys like that. I could see them taking a tackle. We mentioned Ozzy Trapillo in play potentially for Kansas City at 31. He's probably more of a second round guy anyway. Obviously, edge is the big one, right?
Yeah.
If Mike Green, if Nick Scorton, if even Landon Jackson are players that kind of start to slide down the board a little bit, I think I would make a pretty aggressive move up the board to add some more juice off the edge. Scorton in particular to me is somebody that is really intriguing because, in Purdue, he played at, I think 260 was his playing weight, looked incredibly athletic off the line. He's very technically advanced as an edge rusher and even was as an underclassman. He makes a lot of sense if he starts to slide down the board. I think, it's an obvious kind of player that he had a down year in a bad system that asked him to do a lot of things that he wasn't good at. So he's very intriguing to me as an edge rusher out of Texas A&M.
Yeah, I like all those. I can't imagine the defensive coordinator, Ejiro Evero, would be happy if the team went tackle or tight end in rounds 2, or maybe running back. They had Travion Henderson in for a visit. Who knows? But I can't imagine having the worst defense
That would excite
maybe in
me,
NFL
honestly.
history, and then having to deal with multiple early round offensive weapons. So that's what it was
Yeah,
last year too. But the defense needs a ton of help. I think safety as well is a big need for this team, and only one of them went in round 1, so somebody's got
yeah,
to be
that's
there.
right. Well, we're going to be back on day 2. We're going to be here for a lot of it. We're going to cover a lot of picks. We're going to give a lot of coverage. It's going to be a long stream tomorrow, right?
Mhm.
It's going to be fun. We'll be back. We're going to have Steve, our content manager. He's going to be joining us. We're going to, dude, it's going to be a long day, I think, tomorrow, but it'll be fun. Again, we've plugged it a lot today, but if you have not already, consider checking out our draft guide. We have a ton of content on there. I've said it a lot. I feel like a broken record at this point because I've talked about just the amount of work that we've put in to our draft guide. Obviously, Colt doing an incredible job with the visuals. So please check it out if you have not already. You can get it at 2pointconversion.com/shop. There's 167 people watching at this point on Twitter alone. And I implore all of you guys to check out our social media. We only have like 60 or so followers right now. So every single one of you guys, watching right now live, it's very much appreciated if you hit the follow button. We're really trying to grow our following up. It's very early in the site's history. Like we just started this month, actually, or I guess a day before this month. March 31st was the official launch date of the site. So we have a ton of content up. We had a lot of mock drafts. My mock draft I released this afternoon it didn't look good. After pick 4, it got pretty rough. I had a few late picks. Let me look at the board. There were a few late picks that I hit. I think I got Derek Harmon or Amarian Hampton, I think, right. I got, let's see, I got Gray Zabel right. I got Jalen Walker right. There's a few later guys, but obviously not the performance that I was necessarily hoping for. But you win some, you lose some.
You're not going to win the draft game and Brett Coleman's contest. Yeah. But to everybody watching, just thank you guys for taking the time. Right. I know that the draft's always a fun time and it's fun to discuss the results. And tomorrow we'll be able to talk more live with some of the picks that come in. But yeah, this is really, really fun. And it is going to be a long stream tomorrow, but I think day 2 is the best of all
Easily.
3 draft days. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it moves quicker. You're not spending like 10 minutes of analysis on one pick, which, can kind of just drag on.
Yeah,
after a
there's
while.
only so much to say, you know?
Right. That's why we went live a little bit later today. Is we were able to kind of hit on the stuff that was a little bit more important and spend more time on what we wanted to. But tomorrow we're just going to be kind of flying through picks. So we're gonna probably start that stream a few minutes before day two kicks off tomorrow. So just tune in. We'll be there, providing a ton of analysis. Obviously, plugging the draft guide a lot more. So if you're watching now, tune in tomorrow, and follow the 2 Point Conversion on Twitter, on Spotify. We're on Blue Sky now at 2pointconversion.com. You can follow Jacob at Jacob LaQuire. You can follow me at dj.png. Jacob, anything else you want to say or plug before we get out of here?
Just have a good night and be ready for tomorrow.
All right. We'll be back. We'll see you guys tomorrow.